Hello, everybody. My name is Dominic Columbia, and today I'd like to discuss a brain disorder that affects many families throughout the world, which is Huntington's disease, and how gene therapy is giving new hope by slowing its progression. Huntington's disease is a progressive degenerative disorder of the nervous system. It affects the brain's cortical centers responsible for movement, rational thought, and reaction. This is a condition that does not just affect the individual physically, but has great emotional, genetic, and social consequences for families, as well as it is hereditary and goes from one generation to another. Huntington's disease is a hereditary degenerative disease resulting from a brain disorder caused by a mutation of a gene called HTT. Because of this mutation, an abnormal protein called Huntington is formed. Slowly, this protein causes injury to the nerve cells in the brain, which leads progressively to a decreased ability on mental and physical functions. HD progresses gradually with symptoms worsening over 10 to 25 years until death. Unfortunately, there's still no cure existent today. However, there's new hope that lies in gene therapy, which appears to slow the effects of the disease. For classification, Huntington's disease can be classified in a few different ways, which falls mostly under the classification of the number of CAG repeats in the HTT gene. The CAG sequence, which consists of cytosine, adenine, and guanine, is repeated several times in everyone's DNA. But when there are too many repeats, it causes Huntington's disease. Adults with adult onset Huntington's disease had between 36 and 55 repeats of the CAG sequence, with symptoms usually beginning after age 30. And for the juvenile HD, it occurs in childhood or adolescence and occurs when there are 60 CAG repeats or more. This form progresses more rapidly and is usually a lot more severe, but both are considered fatal. For the pathophysiology, in order to understand how Huntington's disease injures the body, we will need to look at the brain. The change that the HTT gene produces makes the Huntington protein too long and too sticky. This sticky protein disrupts and damages the neurons, the most vulnerable of which are the subcortical structures known as the striatum, a component of the basal ganglia responsible for movement. As these neurons die, the brain loses its ability to deal with movement and coordination effectively, and this results in the bizarre jerky motions and the lack of the sufficient motor control that's really common for this disease. But the injury does not stop here, since as other brain regions are affected, they're also affecting the physiological processes involved in thought, mood, and behavior. And at the bottom, you can see we have the normal brain section compared to the Huntington's disease, and the frontal horns are a lot different. So for the causes and risk factors, Huntington's disease originates mainly by genetic determination. It's being hereditary to autosomal dominant pattern. So that is, if one parent is in possession of the genetic change, each child has a 50% chance of carrying it. The condition is not skipped in generations, and both sexes are equally liable. Interesting to note is the fact that very occasionally the genetic change is found to expand during its passage from the parent to the offspring, which may result in earlier manifestation of symptoms of the disease in the child when he or she inherits the genetic tendency. Other possible factors include intestinal health, environmental factors, and variations in genetic structure, although the genetic change in the HTT gene appears to be the major, if not the only determining factor. So, signs and symptoms, I broke it down into a couple different sections. Um, we have, because there's a lot that plays into the symptoms of Huntington's disease. You can have it with cognition, the motor symptoms, and the behavior symptoms. So, so the movement or motor symptoms include involuntary movements, difficulty walking or maintaining balance, slurred speech, difficulty swallowing. Cognitive or mental symptoms include the difficulty concentrating on completing tasks, slow thought processes, or impulse control, unawareness of their own actions. And then for the behavioral and psychological symptoms, these usually appear really early on, and this can consist of depression and irritability, social withdrawal, insomnia or difficulty sleeping, loss of motivation and energy, and in severe cases, thoughts of death or suicide. Since it affects the brain as a whole, Huntington's disease often requires very large team approach with neurologists, psychiatrists, psychiatrists, and therapists all included to help with the disease. So for treatment options, as I listed before, yeah, medication, psychotherapy, and physical therapy, they all help, but there is no cure for Huntington's disease, and there there's medications that can help with improving the quality of life and helping with the symptoms. Some of these include tetrabenazine, which helps with reducing involuntary movements, and there's antipsychotic antipsychotics, which are consist of olanzapine, and that helps with agitation and aggression, as well as antidepressants help for the depression and anxiety, and therapies include physical therapy, speech therapy, and occupational therapy all help with avoiding the dysfunction and helping maintain independence for as long as possible. So this last part is my main focus of the presentation, gene therapy. Um, it's very exciting. It's a huge development in the Huntington's research in the last few years. It's had a lot of research done on it. And Huntington's disease is a good candidate for gene therapy since it is caused by one gene mutation. Gene therapy attempts to silence or correct the defective HTT gene so that it does not describe the toxic Huntington protein. Recent studies have utilized techniques such as antisense oligonucleotides. These are short strands of modified DNA that bind to the mutant gene mRNA and prevent it from transcribing the toxic protein. In the trials, these new drugs have been shown to reduce the level of toxic protein and slow disease progression in patients. Though this treatment is still in the study stage and it's not in general use yet, it does represent a big leap toward the first ever type of therapy that does not just treat the symptoms, but actually attacks the source of Huntington's disease and helps slow the disease. Many scientists hope that with continued improvements in gene therapy techniques, including the CRISPR system, someday the disease could be prevented altogether in future generations. In summary, Huntington's disease is a devastating but somewhat interesting condition. It teaches us how one small genetic mutation can have a widespread effects on the brain and the body together. While current treatments focus on symptom management, gene therapy is offering new hope by targeting the disease as its source with the mutated gene itself. Thank you for listening.